Well, good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, April 23rd, and welcome to Coffee with Ken. I'm Ken Biberaj, a managing director at Savills, a leading tenant advisory commercial real estate firm, and we are coming to the end of week 6 of social distancing as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The United States House of Representatives is set to vote on a $484 billion relief plan today. The Senate Majority Leader suggested that some states may need to file for bankruptcy, and 4.4 million Americans filed for unemployment this week. Today's topic is the future of flex office in a post-coronavirus world, and I am so incredibly excited by the panel we have today. We have Amol, the CEO of Knotel, Jamie Hodari, the CEO of Industrious, and Ryan Simonetti, the CEO of Convene. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you as well.
Thanks for having us.
So,
Yeah,
I am here
thanks
virtually.
for having us on, Ken.
Yeah, well, I hope you have your own cup of coffee. I am virtually here at Swings Coffee on 14th and G in Washington, D.C., so it's great to have you here, and looking forward to a talk. Listen, the last 6 weeks have been incredibly devastating to the global economy, to folks all around the world. Each of you has taken some incredible actions and made some difficult decisions during this time. It'd be great to hear, what has this time been like for you, and what steps have you taken to move forward and make sure on the outside of this that you're stronger than ever? Ryan, maybe we start off with you.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'd say first, this has been extremely hard and really emotional. I think for our team, our clients, the communities that we live and that we operate in, and the human impact of this is really heartbreaking. And we've had the opportunity to see that firsthand, with our own team members. I'd say since the beginning, we've been extremely proactive. We moved really early on this and have been pretty decisive, I think, since the beginning in the way that we've dealt with this crisis. The first thing was, as I'm sure for Jamie and Amol as well, the health and safety of our team and our clients has been our top priority since the beginning. And so we were actually the first in the industry to close all of our locations in early March. The second thing we did is really start to refocus. What do we have to do to survive, right, this crisis for however long that lasts? And so the focus there was really on reducing expenses and really trying to take down our monthly burn. Unfortunately, as part of that process, we had to lay off and furlough many of our team members. And I think the priority for us there was doing everything in our power humanly possible to take care of those people financially. We're covering 100% of health benefits for all of them. They continue to have access to virtual medicine and mental health support through our partners at Eden Health. And we ended up creating a relief fund where our executive team donated. I donated up 100% of my salary to that. And we've actually been giving stipends to our furloughed and laid off employees, really to help them financially navigate this really challenging time. And then, the other two things that we've been focused on is working closely with our landlord partners to really make sure that we have the temporary relief that we need to kind of navigate this together, and doing that in a win-win way that works economically for them and then buys us the time that we need. And then the last thing I think that you have to do is, in these situations, cash is king. And so we've fortified our balance sheet, working with our lenders and shareholders to make sure that we have the liquidity to really navigate this regardless of how long it goes on, but also to be able to play offense. We don't want to be a company that has to sit here and play defense the next 12 and 18 months waiting for a vaccine. We want to have the capital to be offensive, invest in some of the new exciting products and services that we're bringing to market. And we believe that M&A and consolidation will come of this. And for the right companies, the right partners, we want to be able to have the capital to actually execute against that stuff.
Right. And we're going to dive into a lot of that. Amol, I'd love to hear from you. And I know you even took a step with your Spaces for Cities initiative and so on. So what else to kind of, add on to, steps Ryan alluded to and how Team Knotels doing?
Yeah, I mean, Ryan and his team have been very smart and have done a lot of very important things. Similar shape in our thinking. By early March, it was pretty clear we were going to have to help our customers shut down a lot of offices and respond to incidents. And we did have to shut it down a lot and secure them, and certainly our people and our customers were a big part of the complexity in the first few weeks. And it's hard. I mean, we were in 10 different countries, and the virus was sort of sweeping around the world at different paces. There's sort of three phases, and the first phase is the health crisis, and we're just getting into the next phase, which is going to be a pretty severe contraction in the global economy. And time is passing so slowly in some ways. Everyone's sort of stuck at home, and I think there may be some premature optimism among some of the business community. I think that May and June, maybe July, are going to be very difficult. And for that reason, we also, took some big steps to make sure that in our most pessimistic outlook, we'd be fine and we'd be in a position to serve our customers. We took our cost structure down by half, and our plan is, hopefully more conservative than even other observers have considered, to make sure that the business has the cash it needs and it's profitable this year. But it has been very difficult. We're sort of talking business, but people are dying. It's been really hard to just sit around and not be able to do that much. We tried to enlist a bunch of the real estate community together and announce some level of support through the different spaces that we operate or that our partners operate, which is that spacesforcities.com. And we've been working with different governments. We can't really provide beds, which is kind of the thing they were most concerned with for the last few weeks. But at some point, if we're lucky and if our governments are smart, there will be more testing and screening. Some of these facilities will be helpful for them.
Yeah, perfect. And Jamie, how about you? I know you've kind of tried to take the lead with some remote technology offerings and so on for clients. What is, real quick, the Industrious angle been?
I think I've tried to kind of mentally group how we navigate this into three kind of core things, to really focus on being prudent, protective, and proactive, which probably sounds like buzzwords, but I think sometimes when you're having to make a lot of decisions quickly, it is helpful to try to have some themes you come back to or some anchors. So prudent, that's pretty clear. I think, Amol and Ryan both referred to this, but putting in place the right sort of cost-cutting measures, and some of which are quite painful, getting as fortress-like a balance sheet as you can, to make sure you're in the sort of best possible position as a business to weather the storm. Yeah. Protective, I think we're probably going to talk a lot about this on this call, but what it means to go back to work in a way that is safe, psychologically safe, medically, sort of public health-wise safe, is probably where the vast majority of our efforts are right now. And it's kind of hard to argue that anything is more important than that. And then proactive, we did put in place a program we call Continuous, which is our sort of the wrapper for our COVID-19 response program. It includes a lot of essentially services for our members who are working from home to make that a more productive, more engaging, less isolating experience. And then a program with all of our corporate customers to work with them on what the return to work is going to look like. And I think we have some announcements coming on that front, but at its heart, I think the focus has been, start and end with both for your employees and for your customers as individuals. What are they going through and what's it going to look like to navigate this?
Great. So look, if the last decade in commercial real estate was defined by this explosive growth in flex office, this is providing a real natural kind of pivot point for everyone in the world to kind of step back, not only think about flex office, but office in general, work in general. I think what's exciting about having all three of you here is you have such a unique vision and perspective and are thought leaders in this space. How do you think work, office space, density, how do you think everything related to your business today will be different once we slowly make our way out of this? And I'll open it up to whoever wants to jump in, and it's a conversation. Just us at a coffee shop with 1,000 of our close.
Jamie or Amol, you guys want to jump in first?
Go for it.
Look at this camaraderie.
Look, I'd say Look, I think as Amol and Jamie both pointed out, this is going to be a phased approach. And I think it's in my opinion, it's a little bit too early to start to predict, although you probably could scenario plan different future outcomes, exactly what the long-term impact on the future of work is going to be. Does that change the way that companies consume space? Does it change the way that they think about experience and technology, et cetera, et cetera? Obviously, this first phase is all going to be, as Jamie talked about, really about health and safety. And that's really about psychological security. And so I think, as I'm sure Jamie and Amal's teams are doing and have been doing, what are the different modifications we have to make to the way that we operate, to the way that we design our spaces and densities as we kind of work our way through this crisis? At the same time, as founders and entrepreneurs, you start to need to be optimistic about what a future can look like and how you can start to rethink your business models, whether that's through new products and new services, a different way to do deals with landlords. And I'm sure both the Industrious and Knotel teams are doing the same things around that as we are. If I had to predict the one thing that I do not see changing, I do not believe flexibility goes anywhere, right? If you think about times of uncertainty, flexibility and agility is actually more important now than ever. And I believe that the trend towards outsourcing will continue to accelerate. And we're already seeing that. I mean, since the crisis, we've had the largest booking period for our flexible workplace product in the last 45 days. And what we're seeing is that companies, one, are reluctant to commit the capital to have to design and build out their own space today. Two, they don't want to commit to a long-term obligation, because if you're a company today making a real estate decision, how could you possibly plan how much space you need today? It's impossible. And then the third thing, which I know we're going to get into today, the operational complexity of delivering a safe environment today is infinitely different than it was 90 days ago. And I can't imagine most of our clients, whether they're big enterprises or smaller to medium-sized businesses that we all collectively serve, is going to have the capability or the capacity or the desire to do that. And so I think we're going to see a massive increase in the desire to outsource, and whether that's space or leveraging us as service partners and providers. But I continue to remain bullish long-term on flexibility and what it means for the industry. Although, yes, there will be impacts to how the relationship between us and landlord plays out and us and customer, but I see that trend accelerating.
And I guess one thing that I would say on that point is, like, I feel like I've talked to a lot of companies, seen different sort of pronouncements from different CEOs in different sectors, and it does seem like most businesses have some message around short-term pain, but actually these are sort of 2 or 3 reasons why the long-term structural changes benefit our industry. And I think the fact that everyone is saying that makes it hard to separate kind of signal from noise or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think what Ryan just said, like, the people on this call are going to have to come to their own conclusion about it. To me, that is very, very, very intuitive. It's very clear. That's not spin. Like, that is, anyone who works in the real estate industry gets that very fundamental point, which is that moments of flux, moments of crisis like this have historically favored the shift to outsourcing industries, whether it's manufacturing, logistics, or what we, or what we on this call do, which is sort of workplace outsourcing. And I think probably most of us could point to the fact, like, who are your best customers? Your best customers in this business are not the companies that create a $30 million gleaming headquarters and then stuff every one of their employees in that headquarters. And that was what most businesses did in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. It's the new way that companies tend to manage their sort of workplace needs, which is a mid-size headquarters where maybe 40% of headcount works, and then a vastly distributed network of regional teams, functional teams, et cetera, spread around the US, spread around the globe, the kind of Spotify's of the world, someone like that.
Sure.
And I think it's really hard to argue that this moment in time and what we're going through and this vast national experiment with 100 million people working from home isn't going to dramatically accelerate that shift.
Yeah.
I think the sweep of your comments is certainly true, and I think anybody that joined our conversation here is familiar, I guess, with that general line of argument. Of course, you know, I think it's true. We haven't been around as long as you guys have. We just started the company 4 and a bit years ago, but certainly with this idea, all we do is dedicated spaces for companies. We run about 500 of them around the world. Average customers like 100 people. They spend $1 million a year. They typically have a couple-year long contract. Mm-hmm. And the reasons that they were starting to use Knotels in different cities will continue to be those reasons. And you know, yeah, I guess I'm hopeful that it accelerates. But I think there are some things will be different. I think you know, business as usual is over, and a lot of things will change. A few of the things that I am very concerned about, I do think there is going to be, at least in the US, not as much in Europe, but there's going to be a devastating period for small business. There are going to be a huge number of mortalities in the small business category, and it's going to be hard to watch. Some amount of our portfolio is smaller companies, you know, 50 people, 100 people, and I am watching some of these folks just start to process just how hard it is, and they haven't even figured it out yet. I mean, we're still just in, maybe we're at the end of phase 1, the health crisis, but the economic crisis is going to be very deep. A lot of our big corporates haven't made decisions yet. They're all a lot slower to make big decisions, I guess. And in the coming few months, we'll see what level of action they take on the global workforce. I think we're just in the starting phases of the unemployment numbers ballooning. Yeah. We have seen the French and the Germans moving a lot faster and better, I guess, than we have here. And business sentiment among corporates is really strong. They're getting ready to get back.
Yeah.
And the shape of revenue collection for us around the world, it actually looks a little bit like the hotspot map. I mean, places that were slow, like the UK or New York, business is struggling accordingly. It's been astonishing. And I think, you know, Flex, if in this intermediate period we see this apocalypse for small business, that is going to be a tricky thing, because historically Flex was adopted first by the smallest companies, and larger ones have been coming along over time. So I think it may change the shape of the market we're looking at. And then, you know, we should talk about the product. What will the workplace experience look like? It's going to be very different.
Yeah. So before we get into the 4 walls of what the space inside looks like, you've alluded to, all of you, a little bit about like the structure of deals vis-a-vis your relationship with landlords might be changing. How do you view, are we done with big leases? I mean, can you foresee now moving forward, entering in large kind of traditional leases, or are we really now seeing a pivot in the flex space to more management, revenue agreements, more partnerships, flex office solutions in the building envelope being almost amenities, and really kind of offering flexible solutions to landlords? How do you moving forward this structure?
I mean, I know Jamie has a very strong opinion about this, and as do I. You know, we've been doing landlord partnerships for 10 years. We did our first management agreements 5 years ago, and you know, if I look at our portfolio today, you know, a third of it is managed. I know Jamie, you know, he committed in Industrious, I think, intelligently to moving, you know, kind of 100% to management agreements over the last year. The challenge is that there's still a structural issue within the industry, right? Both from a capital markets perspective, as well as from a REIT regulatory perspective. There's something called qualified and unqualified income, which to some extent limits how creative many asset owners can be around deal structure, in particular around managed or even participating leases, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, I think unfortunately the capital markets aren't fully there yet. Whether this sets that conversation back or accelerates it, TBD. I can tell you from our conversations with our landlord partners, including many of which are investors in Convene, in the company, including Brookfield and RXR, as well as some others. The appetite to move towards managed to create better alignment, I believe it is there from the landlord community. The question is now getting the lender community and the broader capital markets, I think, to fully buy into that. Where
I feel like they were just getting there, right?
They were close. They were close. They were close.
Of the building, maybe, right? Like people's appetite.
Yeah. And I think it really is going to depend on the size of the footprint and the percentage of the building. And what we're seeing is that as long as you're under, used to be 20% of the building, today it's more like 10%. That if you can stay under a certain size threshold, that the willingness and appetite to do managed or to do participating deals or to do super creative leases, that appetite is and continues to be there. And if not, if anything, we're actually seeing more of an influx of that since this crisis began.
Yeah, I mean, and Jamie, I want you to jump in, but I would imagine, right, so many traditional office tenants are having a lot of issues, aren't able to pay rent, have had to close. So that kind of guarantee of, if I have an office lease, then I'm fine. Why would I do management? I wonder if all of that's kind of coming into question now. And a structure like a flex office solution in a building may afford more diversity of potential revenue and so on. But Jamie, go ahead. I know you want to.
I mean, the problem is I feel so strongly about this that I worry I can't come at it in a clear-eyed way. If the company is known for one of a small number of things, this specific commitment to only growing on the back of partnership agreements with landlords, full stop. It's been almost, I think this month might be 2 years since we signed a lease. That has been a core part of this company's strategy. And I think what I will say is, first off, just looking at what the last month has been like for our first 52 units released, and then everything since then were partnership or management agreements. It's been very different. With the management agreements, we sit down with the landlord and say, are we open or are we closed? What are we going to do at the building level? How do we integrate the services we provide? What's the financial structure with our customers? And you're able to sit on the same side of the table in a moment of a lot of chaos and where a lot of difficult decisions need to be made quickly, and you can do it as partners. And in our leased units, we have close relationships with these landlords, and a lot of them we also have managed units with. So I wouldn't say it's so dire, but you really feel the pain of what it's like when it's on an arm's length basis. And of course, from a financial security, sustainability point of view, the managed portfolio, if revenue is down 12%, it's down 12%. There's less of that existential threat that you're seeing in the sort of lease-based version of this industry. And my sense is every landlord understands that. I bet every broker on this call understands that. And not only that, but it's become very clear that a single purpose entity lease with a nominal fixed obligation, when you get into a crisis, a company can only put money into a money losing unit for so long. Oftentimes those don't turn out to be all that fixed after all. And so I do think the death knell of kind of like new lease-based workplace as a service, I think had probably already been sounded this fall with the failure of the WeWork IPO. And to me, this is, if that wasn't it, this is definitely it. And you will see very few leases being signed in this industry, but lots of management contracts.
And Amol, I feel like there's been such a transition even in the DC market for landlords creating so many spec suites. I feel like Knotel would be well positioned to also kind of, I'm sure you're having a lot of these conversations to help landlords manage their own spec suite solutions or kind of come in there as almost a space as a service option as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, management partnerships with landlords make landlords more money, but it isn't trivial for them to make it happen.
Sure.
As Ryan points out, there's some other parts of the industry structure that'll have to evolve. But they make more money, and it's because companies save money overall while spending more against the workspace. Typically, the real estate community has only seen about half the cost of the workspace. A landlord collects the base rent, and then a company spends that same amount again to keep their people there, to design it, manage it, change it, all kinds of stuff over time. And you know, I feel like we've re-explained the point a million times when folks are looking at a real estate deal and just talking about base rent, but corporates know it only takes a second. You know, I was with the head of real estate for Uber on Friday, and they have something like 600 spaces around the world, and he knows, you know, what it costs fully loaded to run a space, and he's ready to spend that amount, maybe even save money by choosing someone like us, but that ends up being 1.5, 2 times more than landlords typically see in base rent, and the opportunity in management agreements with Knotel and others is you can make more money. I mean, it's pretty easy, but it is going to be a long transition. We have more than 500,000 feet in straight partnerships. It's coming up on a million, and I think that will continue to accelerate this year for sure. And you know, the thing that any landlord has difficulty with, even if you're the biggest one in the world, you know, you're Brookfield or someone, they just don't have a lot of density in any given market where they operate, which means they're not the biggest store. Demand comes to places where you can shop and where you can find lots of assortment. And the approach we've taken over the years now is to have lots of options in lots of cities. And when a company does a deal with us, yeah, we may start out in DC, and then we'll be in Atlanta, and then we'll be in Berlin, and then in Tokyo together, because big companies turn out to be the majority of the real estate market. 60% of office revenues comes from only 2,000 companies. So it's all about them.
Excellent. So as an FYI to everyone listening, we do have a chat function which people are taking advantage of. I'm trying to read and keep up with it, as well as a Q&A function. I'll do my best. I want to real quick pivot to just office, the market, right? So if there is, Ryan, as we were talking about, a consolidation amongst providers, Savills just put out a Future of Flex co-working report yesterday. I'm going to post a link to that. Sarah Dreyer and our team, our research team, put that together. And then it kind of looks just at how much space in a market is co-working flex. And if there is a consolidation or reduction in that occupancy, how does that impact the more macro office market? And plus, with other companies having their own issues, what do you see about happening, playing out over the just traditional office market vis-a-vis flex and just in general? And providing more opportunities and less for how does that impact you?
Yeah, I mean, I would think about that probably in 2 phases or 2 parts. One is short term, right? And I think for all the things that Amol was talking about earlier, you know, the economic fallout from this crisis, at least based on the conversations that we're having with our clients, other founders and CEOs that are really on the ground, you know, this will most likely be deeper and more painful than even what we experienced back in 2008 and 2009. And right or wrong, office demand tracks employment, period. Right. And that's always been one of the key drivers of the asset class. And so I think the question right now isn't even about co-working or flex versus traditional. It's more macro, just what does office demand at a very macro level look like, period, during the short term? And where does that demand go? Does it go into more traditional long term, which I would think about as landlord provided? Does it move into more traditional co-working, or does it go into really the stuff that Amol and I think Convene does, which is, you know, we design and run private space for companies. I mean, our average customer size is 30 people. Average duration is almost 2 years. I think it's a little bit of a different offering. What I would say is, if you look at just macro, and this is kind of thinking a little bit long term, if you look at the office industry today, almost 80% of all real estate is actually occupied by companies under 20,000 feet. The other 20% is actually larger occupiers. I'm sure that Jamie and Amol and I could make a logical argument that any company under 20,000 feet is better off being in a serviced environment as opposed to a non-serviced environment. Now, is that to say that 80% of real estate is going to become flex over the next decade? Probably not. But again, I do think that there's a more medium to long term, I think the structural shift towards serviced and flexible will continue, but my sense is the next 24 months, if you're an office investor, is going to be a really, really, really challenging time.
Yeah, and I'd love to kind of pick your brain, all of you, about how you view the role and relationship for your organizations with the broader brokerage community, right? So at Savills, we have a platform called Work There, which is an advisory service that helps aggregate flex office solutions. We're trying to lean into this, right? To your point, so many tenants are under 20,000 square feet. We are looking to provide advice to them, compete landlords against each other, and frankly, compete them against flex office solutions because there are so many options out there. They may be a better fit for one or each of you, right? So how do you view your relationship with the brokerage community, and how do you leverage brokers to kind of help enhance your retention and growth in any market?
Well, for us, I mean, brokers are very important partners. There's no company that's an expert on their office. I mean, that's partly the point of using a partner or an operator like us to do things. But companies are infrequently in the market making these decisions. You know, like my friend from Uber, who's trying to run 600 locations around the world while sitting in his bedroom in Oakland. It's just impossible. And I think the on-the-ground knowledge and expertise of the brokerage community is huge and very important. It's certainly why it has an intrinsic role. Every large company is represented. I mean, it's not even, it'd be silly for a large company not to be, and everyone is. And we certainly try to work as closely as we can. And then, of course, on the other side, we work very closely with that same community on the properties where we want to do deals. And we value very much.
Right. Jamie?
For us, you know, a lot of our business now, you know, we go to a building, we manage the co-working at the building, so the kind of, you know, productized space for teams of 20 and below. We manage the spec suite program of the building, so, you know, sort of customized spaces for teams of 20 to 200, and then the sort of tenant experience for all of the tenants of the building. And in those circumstances, that's been very helpful for getting much closer with brokers on the leasing side, because we have to integrate with the leasing brokers of the building and say, how are we positioning this building and how do we work hand in hand? On the occupier broker side, I think, you know, to Amol's point, like this is how the vast majority of businesses navigate this. And you work very closely with the head of workplace and the, you know, the sort of real estate teams of the companies directly, but certainly any company of size, their trusted advisor is their Savills broker or whoever else it is. And I think the thing I will say, and this is going to sound a little fluffy, but it relates also to your kind of M&A question, is I think people in other industries recognize like the people who do it the best tend to win. And I think in traditional sort of asset ownership, there isn't a question of product quality or of service quality or things like that. And so people often look at our industry, and I think brokers have gotten very good at moving away from this, but have looked at our industry and have basically said, who's got density where and what square footage and who, you know, and sort of treated it as this commodity, when in reality, you know, the companies that have said, we are going to be better than anyone else at delivering a great day at work to customers that come every day and use our product. And for the next year, the question is going to be who does a better job of delivering a full environment that customers can trust and feel comfortable in than anyone else. And I think what a lot of brokers are going to find is, yes, there are going to be all the same traditional questions about, is it 20,000 square feet or 17,000? And, you know, is it a center core or, you know, and on top of that, there will be all the questions around where are employees going to be taken care of, where they're going to be safe, where are the correct sort of protocols in place to look out for people. And that's where we really, I think, could do better at integrating with the brokerage community, because that is the value prop. And the more we can speak the same language, the better.
So let's dive into the four walls of your space, right? So Will Lucas is asking a question. Is this going to alter the density that your value prop is kind of based on, right? Like what is your physical space and your business model going to look like 3 months from now when people come in? Are you moving furniture around? Are you changing setups? You know, what does the actual, you know, space look like now?
Look, it's go ahead. Sorry, Jimmy, you want to go first or?
I guess all I was going to say is, so I will touch on the space question. I think one important note that probably all of us would hit on is a lot of the early reports on this front are about space.
About what?
And part of that is because it's architecture firms about space, about what's the space going to look like. And a lot of that is, I think, in certain ways, that's the easiest to come out with kind of quick answers on. You know, that is one of a lot of factors that will determine if a workplace you know, is effective at keeping people with COVID from entering the space, and if God forbid they do, from that transmitting through the space. And so the really good playbooks, the offices that are well run, will probably be more around the behavior management side than just the sort of space modification side. But to answer the space modification side directly, you know, for us, we kind of have two core products: co-working for teams of 20 and below, and then large suites. They both represent their own unique problems. On the co-working front, you have a lot of shared space. And my guess is that there's not going to be a whole lot of that for the next year. For better or worse, that value prop of what it means to work in a shared workplace environment is probably, for the most part, going to diminish or kind of go away completely. On the other hand, co-working floor plans are the ideal floor plan for this. The more we worked with medical partners, with partners on what it means to stop the spread of disease within a space, having, you know, 150 different 1 to 4 person private spaces on different HVAC runs where you have more control is infinitely better than 120 people in a giant open floor plan space on a single HVAC loop where there's like, the point is kind of obvious. And so I think the solutions we're gonna have to put in place are different for each. And I actually think in certain ways, the more that we are working through this problem, it's the large 100, 200 person suite space where you're going to have to make more changes, and it's going to be a little tougher, I think, to actually manage this than the highly broken up space.
Yeah, good, Ryan.
Yeah, so I'd say the first thing, you know, is for our business, we don't make money on density. That's actually never been the strategy. I mean, we get paid to deliver services and experience, you know, both for our landlord partners as well as for our end users. I mean, our spaces today are, I think, 20 or 25% more generous from a density perspective than the co-working industry, more broadly speaking. I think the real question is, you know, how do you, and to Jamie's point, how do you create an environment that's safe? And it's much less about design today as it is around behavior. And so, you know, we've been working with, you know, obviously medical consultants. We've been spending a lot of time with operators in Asia, Hong Kong and Singapore, as well as mainland China, who, you know, this isn't the first time that they've dealt with a pandemic, right? And so they've had now decade plus of experience in kind of how do you operate, you know, in these situations. So I'd say first thing is, from a health and safety perspective, is partnering. We actually have a partnership with Eden Health, where they've been consulting with us not just on the physical environment, but also how do we offer really healthcare as a service to all of our different workplace customers. And that could include testing as well through their platform, which we think, you know, testing and our ability to confirm who has had or who hasn't is going to be really important, you know, for us and for our customers as we re-enter people back into the workspace. The second thing is, from a density perspective, it is our belief, and this is really what's happening in Asia, that is going to be mandated to us most likely by local government authority. It is not going to be up to Convene how dense or how not dense we want to run. We feel that that stuff will ultimately come as part of these broader reopening plans, and we're going to have to respond to that. Right now, we're assuming that all of our spaces will have to operate 50% less dense, including at the floor occupancy level. So if you have a floor that can accommodate 300 people, well, guess what? Moving forward, you can only have 150 people on that floor. And in each of our private spaces for our bigger customers, you're going to be able to only have half of whatever that allowable occupancy is in that space. So we're obviously working on rethinking furniture layouts and all that sort of stuff, you know, to make sure that we can maintain social distancing, you know, throughout our spaces. And then the last thing is really from an operational perspective and from a human perspective. So everything from temperature checking, you know, to making sure that we're monitoring the flow in our spaces, taping floors to maintain, you know, distancing away from, you know, our pantries and nourish bars. There's just so much that's going into it on the human side, and there's a tremendous amount of complexity there. And we're actually we'll be publishing our plan and new protocols publicly next week. and are already working with our customers on implementing that stuff so that we can slowly start to bring people back to our spaces.
Nice. Amol, I have a colleague, Wendy, right? And every time we go to a pitch, she always talks about well standard, right? So I even started calling her wellness with Wendy, right? We have coffee with Ken. How do you think, I mean, and I feel like that was always something we would talk about in conversations with tenants, but now is obviously going to be something that's dramatically more important, not only with our conversations with tenants, but for our effort to hold landlords accountable for the buildings and the services. How are you thinking through just wellness in the space and what you're providing to your tenants?
We're going to have to redesign everything, not just our spaces, but all those spaces corporates are sitting on. When I'm talking to heads of real estate, they haven't yet figured out, I mean, they're still just thinking about how to get back staggered returns and certain percentages of the office as maximums of occupancy and things like that. And there are some fairly obvious changes around changing density and separation, changing some communal spaces, some of the operational changes on cleaning protocols. And then there will be some longer term changes. I mean, I think it's going to be really important how access control works for tracing who was in the office on a given day, outsiders, but also staff, managing total density in the office at a given time and rate limiting it. Potentially scanning temperature and things like that if it's helpful. And the redesign is going to be deep. It's like surfaces have to be different. Meeting rooms are going to be different. There are going to be a lot more of these individualized phone booth kind of spaces. But they may end up being dedicated to one person or to a small pod of people instead of being communal shared spaces that anyone can use. The role of UV light, and there's going to be changes to ventilation for sure. In buildings, it hasn't been a thing that owners have thought about from a deep enough way. And as we've been evaluating some of our portfolio, partly just because the economy is going to be terrible for small businesses, but some of the portfolio is properties that might be pre-1960. They have these pinch points in lobbies, single elevators, poor ventilation. I think these are not going to be healthy buildings, and we're going to get out of some of our properties.
So look, we're winding down, running out of time. I promised you all we'd keep this to 45 minutes. So in closing, obviously you're all dealing with phase one of this, right? The immediate response, physical and emotional and economic impact. When do you think you'll be in a position, or maybe you already are, to more proactively think about growth and kind of, ramping back up, et cetera? Like, how are you thinking about that? Is it just kind of hunker down and make the tough decisions right now? Or are you already kind of planning about what phase 2.0 of Industrious, Convene, and Knotel are going to look like?
Well, I'll just briefly offer my view. I mean, we are still in April. Things are going to be worse. Don't know how much worse. And so we've taken the firmest possible position everywhere for now. That's going to start changing when the evidence suggests that that things are moving. Some clues already. European markets, I see some really positive signs. And across the business as a whole, I think we're down like 2% from a month ago. And we're still double where we were 6 months ago. So as a whole, I feel some confidence, but it would be way premature to declare victory.
Sure. That's good to hear, though. Ryan?
Yeah, I think similar to Mall, we're definitely in hunker down mode as it relates to cost mitigation, how we're thinking about CapEx and future pipeline deals. We're not really committing a tremendous amount of CapEx to anything in future pipeline as it relates to 2021 in particular, unless it's managed or partnership oriented where the landlord or one of our enterprise customers is really putting up the bulk of the capital. We are starting to think, though, about the future and what a future state looks like, and are well on our way to what we're thinking is really Convene 2.0, which is how do we deliver a Convene experience to what we think will continue to be a hybrid workforce. And that means at our space in a Convene location, at your space, and then ultimately remote and at home. So we're in the process of launching something called By Convene for both landlords as well as occupiers, where we can design, build, and manage your own experience for you, leveraging our capability, our technology stack. You get access to all of the benefits of technically being a part of the Convene ecosystem, but in your own footprint. And then we've already launched something called Convene at Home for remote workers to really support an at-home and remote workforce to better support them. And a big part of that is actually the meeting and conferencing part of our business, right? We're seeing a huge shift as this one here. Historically, this would have happened face-to-face, and now it's either moving to virtual or hybrid. And so we're building out a digital almost manifestation of Convene's physical experience for meetings and conferencing. We've already hosted over the last couple of weeks multiple large digital conferences and meetings and events for our clients. So I think we're doubling down on the digital and services side of our business, and we will continue to invest aggressively there because we think that will continue to play a bigger and bigger part of the future as I think remote and virtual becomes an accelerated trend line.
Excellent. Jamie?
So on the growth side, I will answer that very quickly. But I mean, essentially, because what we do is partnerships with landlords, we have 60 units under construction or on the way, and it's really their choice. Like, we want to be a good partner to our landlord partners. We have landlord partners that are full steam ahead, and others that say, "Hey, cash is very dear right now. We'd like to pause this." And I think that's, like, in the end, obviously we prefer they move forward, but it's whatever is right for that landlord partner. We will definitely still grow as a result of that, but it's the ball is in their court. The thing I want to make sure to say, and I know we're over time, is it's really easy to focus on what's Convene going to do, what's Industrious going to do, what's your corporate strategy. And I can't say enough times, that stuff all matters, but if there's going to be M&A and there's going to be consolidation and there's going to be winners and losers, those will be determined by the companies that deliver the best, safest, most productive workplace environments. And the companies that begin and end with a employee first, people first approach to this, rather than the kind of what's my corporate growth strategy, more than ever, those are the companies to bet on in a moment like this.
Well, look, in closing, and kind of to piggyback on that note, as a tenant broker and someone who's bullish on flex, I've had the opportunity to get to know so many of your colleagues and teammates and employees. And I just want to say that I think all of you do such an incredible job of recruiting and attracting talent. And I can't imagine just how difficult the last few weeks have been for all of you organizationally just to make those tough decisions. So just, on that note, obviously, to Amol's point previously, there's a very human element to this. And I just want you to know that I think you guys are doing a great job in general, and excited to get out of this with you and hopefully continue to build relationships. I want to thank you all for coming on. Obviously, based on the comments on the side, we can only get to a handful. So this is obviously a topic that is very exciting and of interest to so many people. I want to thank the over 1,000 people that tuned in today. First off, thank you guys for being here. Our next Coffee with Ken is going to be on Monday, April 27th with Billy Shore, the founder of Share Our Strength. And then on Thursday, April 30th, we're going to have Wes Moore, the CEO of the Robin Hood Foundation. So hopefully you can tune in, and we're excited to continue these. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. Amol, Jamie, thanks, guys. Cheers. See you guys later.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.